Hello, New Orleans Nation. Has it been a week already? Oh, my word, honey, how time flies when I'm not with y'all. But that's okay, because your favorite country girl is back with another tale of mayhem for your listening pleasure. If this is your first time, welcome. The ushers will be around shortly with comment cards. And if you are a regular, honey, sit yourself right on down and lean over and tell your neighbor, ooh, I know this gonna be good this week, girl. And you may be able to tell I am trying something a little different this week. I didn't use my opening monologue. So, I'm still trying to tweak my little podcast. And every week I learn something new, just like you. Well, this week I'm going to take you back in time. Not too far, though. We're just going back to 2007, 2008-ish. Just to set the scene for you in Michigan, this is during the time that Barack Obama was gearing up to run for president and he was sweeping the floor against Hillary for the Democratic nomination. And then in local politics in Detroit, Michigan, our black Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, they was trying to kick his ass. But there was some real sinister shit going on in Michigan that didn't have nothing to do with politics. I'm talking about there was a real nasty piece of work on the loose in Lansing, Michigan. Women were coming up dead, beaten, strangled, stabbed. And I'm talking about white women, y'all. Older white women, users of the drug white women, people that sold a little cootie cat on the side white women. Still, white women, which is different from what we normally hear in these situations. But I'm saying, white women were coming up unalived, and the police were just overlooking the similarities of these murders. We know ain't nothing unusual about that. And in one case, they even convicted an innocent man of one of the crimes that our melanated mayhem maker did. Ooh, this week's was a old nasty piece of work. And personally, I think that there should be a hell underneath hell for him to be banished to. No empathy this week. No. Straight up serves your mucky ass right coming from me. New Orleans Nation, this week's Melanin Mayhem maker is Matthew Emmanual Macon. Matthew Emmanual Macon, known as Chilly to his friends and his family, he was born September 8, 1979 in Lansing, Michigan. His parents, Earlene Macon and James Henry Macon Jr., he had 3 siblings too, y'all. 1 sister and 2 brothers. And we've heard this many, many times before as a recurring theme. Chilly's home life was full of trauma and dysfunction and abuse. Oh, Daddy Macon, he would never be candidate for Father of the Year because he was said to have abused Chilly and his siblings both physically and sexually. They say Chilly had to watch as his father fucked with his sister using broomsticks and other foreign objects. Now, I don't have no idea how the mama played in all this. What the hell Earlene was over there doing? She was probably trying to lay low, because if he was beating on the children, chances are he was beating on her ass too. But she was in the home while this was taking place. And it went on for some years. You know what did Sophia say in The Color Purple? A girl child ain't safe in a house full of men folk. Well, yeah, that was a true statement for Chilly's sister. Now, the state finally took the sister away in 1983. They put her in foster care, but they left Chilly and his brothers inside the home. Now, what kind of sense did that make? I mean, if you're going to remove one child, every child in the home should be removed. I mean, Chilly was only like 4 years old at the time. And I'm saying, if you leave a kid with a violent sexual predator, what's the thought process behind that? I mean, what is leaving them in the home going to do? I'm going to tell you what it's going to do. It's going to groom this child how to be a predator, basically. Now, Chilly's mama, Miss Erlene, she put up with the shit for as long as she could until she couldn't take it anymore. Now, I don't know where his mama dipped off to. We just know she got the hell on out of Dodge after she took out a restraining order on her husband in March of 1984 because she was tired of him going upside her head. Now, Sister Kate left. She left Chilly and his two brothers behind. Left them right on in there with their daddy. Not that he cared that she was gone because Daddy Macon Jr., he had a 17-year-old pregnant side piece on Erlene. 17? You heard me, 17. That's somebody's child. Well, he used to go upside his underage side piece's head, too. Now, it ain't no word if that baby she was pregnant with was his, but apparently he didn't care because he beat her with a baseball bat because she didn't want to get out there on the stroll. She said that he threatened to kill her ass if she didn't take on bottom bitch status. Now, I don't know. She must have warmed up to the idea or something because she recanted her story to the police about getting beat with the baseball bat, and she ended up staying with this nigga for years and years. And how do we know she stayed? Because he pulled a gun on her brother 11 years later in 1996. So apparently she liked what he was putting down. But enough about daddy masochist. Let's get back to his sadistic son that he was raising. Now, the state would eventually double back around and scoop Chilly up and put him in foster care in 1989 when he was around 10 years old. But I think the damage was already done. Because, he ran away from the foster homes and he bounced around the system and began building his criminal resume. Started with beginner shit like larceny, breaking and entering, stealing cars, couple of sexual assaults for good measure. He was just warming up, right? And then in 1995, when he was 16, he stepped his criminality up a notch and raped a 14-year-old girl with a stick. I wonder where the fuck he learned that from, huh? He was charged and arrested, went to jail while he was waiting on his trial. And when he stood before the judge a year later in 1996, for sexual assault charges. They pled that rape down. Y'all know I always say men can use their dicks as weapons and they get a slap on the wrist every time. While he was standing in front of the judge, his lawyer said that he had been a model prisoner, working on himself, and he was ready to be back in society. Fortunately, the judge was not believing that shit. Because the judge said no matter how good he was behind bars, he was going to need lifetime vigilance to ensure that he never reoffended again. So even the judge understood that this little nigga needed some serious therapy. But of course, who was going to make sure that he got the help that he so clearly needed? It wasn't going to be his raping, beating daddy. His mama was gone, and there was no other family, it appears. So it's going to make sure that Chilly got the counseling that he needed. No one. Because mental health has never been a priority in America. We can know that someone needs mental help, document that they need mental help, but it never ever comes to pass. So rather than spend the resources on rehabilitation of a warped mind, we just lock people up and then let them out to figure it out on their own. And then when they reoffend, all that is offered is prayers and condolences, and our thoughts are with you, but not any actual money to do some actual helping. No real insurance to actually help. It's a vicious cycle, and we have got to learn from it at some point. But back to the story. As a juvenile, Chilly and his brothers, they had extensive criminal history, right? We've known that. Chilly's name was known to law enforcement. In 1999, he caught a larceny charge out here stealing from a motherfucker. He pleaded guilty in March of 2000 for that larceny charge, and they gave him a year in jail, but he had already been in jail, so he got credit for serving 318 days, so they basically gave him 3 years of probation. He violated this probation January of 2001. So when he violated, went before the judge, they sentenced him to 2 to 10 years, and they gave him credit for about a year, right? They let him out. April 16, 2003, he gets paroled for the first time. Yes, you heard me say the first time. Because this ain't going to be the last time that this little nigga gets paroled. He's paroled April 16, 2003. 8 months later, December 2003, he violates his parole again and gets sent back to the pokey. He's locked down for about 17 months. And this time, September 25th, 2004, he gets paroled for the second time. Remember that. This is now on his second parole. Now, you would think that he would get out and act like he got some sense, right? Nope. What's the polar opposite of having sense? Acting a goddamn fool. And that's exactly what Chilly does because he realizes the police aren't actually interested in finding culprits who commit crimes. And so these crimes that he is about to commit, he just finna have at it. And boy, does he act a goddamn fool. And boy, does he act a goddamn fool. In December of 2004, a woman named Barbara Jean Tuttle, 45 years old, was raped. She reported it and trying to get through the trauma of all that, right? Being raped is some traumatic shit. She's trying to learn how to feel safe again when this motherfucker doubled back around a week later and killed her. She was found beaten and sodomized and raped again and left in a house over at 1017 North Washington Avenue. Her murder went unsolved for 3 goddamn years. I mean, that's fucked up. It's bad enough to be raped once, but to be killed a week later and re-raped again, and that isn't enough to get law enforcement off their ass to find your attacker. Ooh, Lansing Police Department, I hope y'all are doing so much better by your citizens now. I mean, this was 20 years ago, true enough, but we had all kinds of bells and whistles and crime-fighting tools and shit, but they couldn't find Barbara's raping, murdering murderer? Okay. Now then there was Carolyn Cronenberg. She was a professor at Lansing Community College. One day in January of 2005, she came to work about 8 a.m., her usual time. She's a professor. She's got a class to teach. She parked her car, waved at campus security as she grabbed her shit and went in the building to go get her classroom ready for her morning class, right? About 8:40 a.m., I'm talking like 40 minutes after she got there, a student walked into her class and found Carolyn bleeding on the floor. She had been beaten, sodomized, raped with some type of electrical device, and strangled. And guess what? Somebody else went to jail for it. You see, that same morning, a man named Claude McCollum, he was in one of the labs at the college at around 7:20 that same morning. He left out to take a break. Carolyn came in, of course, at around 8 o'clock, as we know, and we know what the fuck happened to Carolyn. So, okay, boom. The police instantly focused on Claude. Now, he admitted that he had been in the lab, but not her classroom that morning, and he had not seen the professor. He wasn't in there when she was attacked, and he damn sure didn't do the assaulting, right? But the police didn't want to hear none of that. They claimed that Claude actually confessed, and he kinda sorta did. How, Renee? Them motherfucking police asked him hypothetical questions, y'all. And he answered them hypothetically. Like they might have said, how would you have committed the crime if you were sleepwalking? Hypothetically, of course. Like, what in the life Jennings do we have going on here? And he answered their questions hypothetically using words like probably and maybe. He wasn't sleepwalking. And he didn't confess to shit. I mean, my God, if this is what law enforcement is doing to get convictions nowadays, heaven help us. I mean, this is not 1904. This is 2004. Like, where was his lawyer? New One Nation, let me tell you something. One of my favorite podcasters, one of her favorite sayings is, shut the fuck up is free. Let me tell you something. If you find yourself in handcuffs, shut the fuck up. It's free. Get you a lawyer to be your mouthpiece because the police will do you dirty when you're on the wrong side of the table. Whatever you say, no matter how you say it, it will be used against you. So don't say shit. However, if you are a raping, murdering motherfucker, please speak the fuck up. Now back to the story. You see, they made him fit the narrative that they were trying to push. I'm talking about Claude. They charged him with murder, but it wasn't hypothetically. They charged him with actual murder. And the killer part is they didn't have no DNA. They didn't have no fingerprints. They didn't have no eyewitnesses and not one goddamn shred of evidence that put Claude at the scene of Professor Carolyn's murder. Didn't matter. The prosecutor said in his closing statement to the jury, quote, he used the word probably. He used that word, folks. It's possible, you know? I think you can glean from what possible would happen. That's his word for telling you he did it. Possibly, what the entire fuck? You guys might be wondering why I'm going into detail about a person that was convicted that's not our mayhem maker. I'm doing it for a reason, y'all. Just bear with me. I promise you. I'm going to tie it all up real nicely with a nice, cute little bow. All right? Now, this trial, 10 days it took to put this man on trial. And the jury took 5 hours to deliberate before them motherfuckers convicted Claude for Carolyn's death on Valentine's Day a year later. And he was sentenced to life in prison. Case closed. You say you innocent, but we don't believe you. Ain't no evidence. We still don't believe you. Ain't no eyewitnesses. So what? We seeing the shit right now. The police, the prosecutor, and the jury, they rushed to judgment on a homeless black man who was just trying to do better in his life and get a degree, right? They made the picture fit what they wanted to see. Case closed. Work undone. While the real killer, y'all letting out on parole and shit. He out here just fucking up the women of Lansing left, right, and sideways. Maybe if someone had done a real investigation, gave an actual fuck, Chilly might have been locked up after Barbara and Carolyn's murder, and he wouldn't have had the opportunity to do the next set of killations that he's about to do. So basically, Chilly has gotten away with 2 murders. The nigga is feeling fancy free and shit. So what does a free nigga do? Well, February 2005, he does a kick door. He is charged with 3rd-degree home invasion and assault, resisting arrest, obstruction, all that shit. He goes to court in June, and they gave him 12 months to serve. So he goes to jail, and then he gets out, and then immediately after he gets out, he violates his parole. May 17th, 2006. Like, goddamn, Chilly. He goes back to prison. They release him again, June 26, 2007, a little more than a year later. Now he's on parole now for the 3rd time. 3rd time. And he gets out, and what does he do? He goes on a 5-week killing spree, attacking 6 women and killing 5 of them. First up, July 26, 2007. This motherfucker ain't been out but a goddamn month. Ruth Hallman is 76 years old, and she was beaten within an inch of her life with a hammer from her own damn house. Some kind of way she finds the strength to crawl across the floor and pull herself to the front door. And she had just enough strength to open the door and kind of lay over the threshold. And neighbors, doing what neighbors do out in the neighborhood, they saw her half hanging out the door and they rushed over to help. The old girl was still alive and seeing yellow stars and purple diamonds and shit swirling on her head, but she was alive. And when it first happened, the neighbors thought that she had cut herself some kind of way because she had been outside cutting grass earlier in the day. And maybe she was woozy from the blood loss and fell and hit her head some kind of way. But the neighbors, they ain't know shit. The first responders, they see that her shirt is completely soaked in her blood and her finger is damn near ripped off her hand. She's not really coherent, but at some point she found the clear-headedness to tell the paramedics to call the police, but she couldn't tell them why. Even throughout all the pain, she found a way to try to set off an alarm for somebody to look deeper. They took her to the hospital and they did everything that they could do for Ruth, but her body had been through hell. And now it was a matter for the Lord whether or not Ruth would pull through. Now, the theory was by the police is that Ruth was killed for some type of revenge. You see, Ruth was a neighborhood activist, and she was trying to get rid of the drug dealers and shit out her neighborhood. So the police theorized that the thugs had retaliated against her for snitching. So they put this story out in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood bought into it. And so they started saying shit like, yeah, they was threatening Ruth. It must have been one of them thugs. I saw one of them thugs over there by her house that same day. All of this is bullshit because ain't none of this shit true. The police said a confidential informant told them that there was a gang of about 5 or 6 of the local drug dealers that had got together and beat this woman. And this person was talking about Ruth apparently had saw something that she shouldn't have seen, so they had to make an example out of her. Lies. Lies, I tell you. And the police, rather than doing their jobs, they just ran with the shit. Like, they got search warrants and snatched up all of these supposed thugging-ass drug dealers who done beat up on this old lady. But of course, once you get them in the box, all of them had alibis and all of their stories made sense. Because they was in there like, we ain't studying that old lady. Don't nobody care about that old lady. That old lady ain't stopping shit. Who you talking about? Like, who the fuck is Ruth? We don't know this woman. And despite trying to make them the guilty party, they just couldn't. They finally realized that the confidential informant is full of shit. Like straight horse manure. So they had to cut the thugs loose. But now it's 2 days after the attack. Y'all watched the first 48. Y'all just wasted the first 48 hours on a wild goose chase. Now, at this point though, They aren't looking for the person who assaulted Ruth. They're looking for the person who murdered Ruth. Because Ruth has gone on to glory. She never ever was able to get enough consciousness to tell them what happened to her. And it's crazy because, like I said, Chilly had only been on the streets for a month. Man, Lansing, Michigan was going through it though. The drug dealers had taken over, and the peoples were fed up that the police weren't acting fast enough or doing enough to combat crime, right? So little neighborhood watches started popping up, and the hoods decided that they were going to patrol themselves. Since the police wasn't going to do it, we got to do it for ourselves. And they started out by making sure that they started coming by the senior citizens' houses and checking on them daily to make sure that everybody was okay, because it's some shit going on in the neighborhood. So the neighborhood watches have started, and then they have Ruth's funeral. The neighborhood is trying to settle back down again. But then a couple of days later, after Ruth's funeral on August 7th, 2007, another one bites the dust. Ooh, honey, let me tell you. 36-year-old Deborah Cook was found in Hunter Park over on the east side of Lansing. And just like the other women, she was beaten badly. And if that wasn't enough, she had a goddamn stick stuck up her hoo-ha. I am not a detective, but it seems like a signature move for a stick or a foreign object of some type in a woman's vagina. When you see two or three or four of them in a go-around, I think it's safe to say that maybe there's a pattern here, right? But what do I know? I'm not a detective. And even though Deborah was younger than the other women, she still had a goddamn stick in her pussy. Right. Someone is going around beating women, raping them, and leaving something inside of their vaginal cavity other than sperm. Right? It sounds like the work of the same culprit to me. But what do I know? What had happened was Deborah met Chilly over at the Marathon gas station. He saw her and he wanted to end her. That's what he said. So he approached her and he started a conversation and asked her how much it would cost him. They couldn't agree on a price, so he walked off. And, Deborah on that shit a little bit, and she ain't finna let this money walk away. So she followed him, and they agreed on a $20 sloppy toppy special, right? And so they walk over to the park, and Deborah think he finna put that thing on her. But it was that fatal thing. Chilly said that the reason he killed Deborah was because she was a crackhead. And it was a crackhead that had testified against his brother and sent his brother to prison. So he wasn't going to let that happen to him. So after he raped her, he had to kill her so she wouldn't testify. Oh, Lord, I told y'all he was an old nasty ass piece of work. And what's crazy, he ain't through. Because on August 9th, 2 days later, 46-year-old Deborah Renfors, she was found in a house on North Washington Avenue. She is the third woman to be beaten savagely, sexually assaulted, and strangled. And here's the kicker about Deborah's murder. It happened in the same damn apartment that Barbara Jean Tuttle was raped and beaten to death 3 years prior. Like, not near it. She was in the exact apartment from 3 years ago. Y'all remember Barbara? Barbara, whose murder y'all didn't try to solve, who got raped one week and unalived the next week? Well, here is the ghost of the Killations past rearing its head. What you gonna do now, law enforcement? I don't know what the law enforcement did exactly, but I do know that low-down Chilly, after he killed Deborah, same day, he went and did a kick though and laid somebody down in a robbery. Like I told y'all, this nigga has no chill, right? But the police, they still trying to see everything but what's right here in front of them, that there is a damn serial killer on the loose. But they would rather say that Elvis was alive and living with Tupac before they would actually say that they had a serial killer. Even with all these similarities staring them in the face, they still saying that the cases are not connected. But the city is up in arms. They can't ignore this shit any longer. Y'all gonna have to do some actual, factual investigations. So they set up a war room and had the charts, like they do on TV, like on Law and Order or any of those other criminal shows. They got a task force started. And they went back and they started looking at attacks that didn't end in death. And then they realized that there had been a string of attacks on elderly women on the west side of Lansing in 2003. The women were beaten and raped, but not killed. The attacker had come to them like a good Samaritan or someone looking for work, knocking on their door, offering to do yard work or help them out or do some other type of shit around the house for free. Then this man would ask for a glass of water or ask them could he use their phone, and when they opened the door, he would attack them. But y'all didn't realize this in 2003 when all these old women came up raped? No pattern? Really? Throw the whole system away. Because on August 27th, 2007, 64-year-old Sandra Eckhorn, she was a regular down at the bar. She liked playing Keno. That was her thing. She didn't bother nobody. She just went down to the bar, sat on her stool, and played her game. She was retired from the GM plant, so that pension was hitting just right. She was what you would call a chill little old lady, right? She ain't want no smoke. But on August 27th, 2007, a man came to her house as she was outside in the yard. He asked her, did she need any work done? And she said no. He said, well, let me give you my card just in case you change your mind. And when Sandra reached for the card, the man grabbed her up and pulled her inside her house and shut the door. And then he commenced to stabbing and beating this woman so viciously. Like, he whooped her ass. And I'm talking about the 64-year-old woman. Now, Sandra, she had a bowl of spaghetti on the table. Tell me why this nigga stuck the business card that he was about to give her. He stuck the motherfucking business card in the bowl of spaghetti. Like, why the fuck would you do that? A card in a bowl of spaghetti is sus as fuck, even for the least smart police officers that are out there. I mean, that's sus than a motherfucker. Which one of these things does not belong, right? Fork, sure. Business card, no. Fast forward later on that day, her son, Gerald, comes to his mama's house and he finds her body, which is crazy. He goes to go see his mom. When he gets there, her door is closed and he knows instantly that something is wrong because his mom was the type to open up the house when she got up every day. Opening up the blinds, opening up the front door. That was part of her daily routine. So when he saw that door closed in the afternoon, he knew something was off. He goes in and he finds his mom on the floor, stabbed more than 30 goddamn times. And when the police work the scene, of course they see that damn business card in the spaghetti. So they do a little detective work. They go and they see that the business card is from a local computer repair shop, right? They go down there and they talk to the owner and come to find out that there was a black man that came in a few days earlier that seemed suspicious to the computer repairman. Says the man came in and he wanted to get a password changed on a laptop that he supposedly had gotten from a friend. The man's name? Matthew Macon. So he had to leave his name and address, and so now the police have that. So then when you add to that there was evidence collected from Sandra's house, they found a work glove that had some DNA inside of it, and the work glove was holding a clump of Sandra's hair. Like, whoever was wearing this glove, they was wearing it when they snatched the shit out of Sandra. I mean, they snatched her enough to snatch her goddamn hair out by the root. Like, goddamn. Too much, too much, too much. So now the police are like, okay, Matthew Macon, we know this nigga, and we know his MO. He likes to sexually assault and beat a bitch and stick shit in their cooches. Okay, we got something to work with. But they was working slow, because the next day, let me tell you something, 56-year-old Linda Chapel Jackson, she was a smart old cookie. Not to say that anybody else in this story was not smart, but if I'm going to describe Linda, I'm going to say that she was a wise woman. She understood where she lived and what was going on, and she tried to protect herself as best she could without becoming a recluse and unwilling to leave her own home, right? She understood that there were drug addicts and drug pushers in her neighborhood, but she wasn't intimidated. She interacted with them every day. When they came around, she let them do a little work here and there, but she always made sure to tell them that I'm going to have to go to the ATM and get some money. I don't have no cash in the house. And the reason she said that was her way of trying to deter them from trying to rob her. If they don't think she got no cash, then they won't try to bust her upside her head. That probably worked on some petty thieves, not having cash on hand, but that don't mean shit for somebody who ain't looking for cash. And like I said, the next day, August 2007, a man came to her back door asking her if she had any work. And it seemed like nothing out of the ordinary. She's used to people coming up, knocking on the door saying that she got some work, right? But as she is talking to this man, she felt like something was a little off about him. I'm not saying that alarm bells were exactly going off, but I will say that her inner guardian angel was like, watch yourself, girl. Hold on now. So she talked to the man through the screen door. She told him she didn't have anything for him to do, but she would pass his name on to her friends to see if they needed something. I'm sure that this was her way of trying to be nice and appear neutral to the man at the door. And this is a decent approach if you aren't sure of a situation. You know, you don't want to alienate this person and you want them to think you okay so that they don't come fucking with you, right? So Linda also thought that she was safe, air quotes, because she could hear the sounds of the neighborhood. You know, there were kids playing right outside. Her neighbors were out in the yard doing what neighbors do during the day, right? This gave her a false sense of security. So she told the man at the door to just stay right there because she had a dog. Hey, baby, you stay right down. Don't come in. I got a dog, and my dog ain't gonna like you, and I don't want him to bite you. Let me go get something to write your information down with. And so the man at her door says, okay. But she notices that he is looking up and down the street, you know, like he's surveying the scene or some shit. And his jaw seemed awfully tight. Y'all know when a nigga jaw is tight, he getting prepared to do some shit, right? Lock that jaw up. So she comes back to the door and ask him what his name is, and he says, my name is Chilly Smith, and then she tells him to write his address and his phone number down. Now, I'm going to just pause for a second here, because, ma'am, you didn't have to talk to nobody that come to your door. You just need to make sure that mug is locked, and you can ignore them like a motherfucker. And I also think that this was an old school screen door that she was talking through. I'm going to need you to upgrade that to glass immediately if you like to sit with your door open, you know, because that door can be locked and it's way more secure than a little frame with a little screen mesh in it. And as for this nigga, sir, you clearly weren't planning on leaving any witnesses behind because you gave her your actual nickname. Like, you couldn't think of no other name other than your own damn nickname. That just go to show you not all criminals are smart. Clearly. You probably would have guessed by now that she was attacked. He yanked that door open and he was on Linda in 2.2 seconds. There was a beer bottle sitting right there on the table. He grabbed that beer bottle and commenced to molly-whopping her ass with it. Talk about this buzz for you. Thankfully, Linda really did have a dog, and when she started yelling, her dog Cheyenne came to the rescue. Cheyenne was like, get off my mama, nigga. He went at Chilly's ass. So Chilly jumps up and he run out the house. She hurt, but she alive. Linda calls 911 and tells them that a man just came in her house and tried to attack her. Now imagine her surprise a few minutes later when 10 motherfucking cars pull up ready to do the damn thing. And Linda looking around like, all of this for little old me? Because even for a white woman, that was a hell of a response. She even asked, you know, was there a party that I wasn't invited to? Because at most, it shouldn't be no more than about 2 or 3 of y'all here, not the whole second shift. And then the goddamn mayor showed up, and then she knew something was up. Like, who the hell just tried to attack me for the mayor to be on the scene? Unfortunately, the assailant was gone by the time the cavalry showed up, though. But y'all know all is not lost because Linda is alive, and she is able to give them a good-ass description of her attacker. Now remember, they got the name from the computer repair shop, and they got a description from Linda that sounds just like Chilly. So they go clickety-clickety-click on the computer to see what pops up for the name Chilly, and guess what? Chilly is a street name for a man named Emmanual Macon. Boom. We got a suspect. Now, the address that was on the card was bogus and the phone was off, but while they're doing their due diligence, they do see that there's a work address for Chilly. So what they do? They pull up 40 deep on his job. Maybe they should have called first because oh boy didn't come to work that particular day. He probably seen all those police at Linda House and realized that the heat was on because again, that's out of the ordinary for 10, 12 police cars to pull up on a crime. So Chilly is laying low. And that's okay because law enforcement got time today. They started blanketing the city of Lansing looking for Chilly. Everybody got one job to do. Find Emmanual Macon today. So they looking. And just like when you looking through your boo phone, if you look hard enough, you might find something. And find the nigga they did. Sort of, kind of. You see, the next day, on August 28, 2007, a cop did see him, and he called it in, and then he lost him. But now they got a general vicinity of where Chilly is, so everybody swarms this area. And the next thing you know, there's Chilly, and they all jump out on him and yoke him up before he even knew what the fuck was happening. But again, now he looking around in surprise, because it's a whole lot of motherfucking police out here. The police, at this point, now they think that Chilly is their man for the serial rapes, the assaults, and the murders, but they still have some more investigating to do to connect all the dots. So when asked why he's being arrested, they tell Chilly that he is being arrested for a parole violation because he had failed to check in with his parole officer as well as failed to register as a sex offender. And we know about that kick though that you did earlier this month, right after that lady Deborah was killed. So we got you for a whole bunch of charges. You're gonna sit tight for a little while we build our case. But Chilly ain't as dumb as he might look, because again, he's looking around at all these flashing lights that came for him, and he knows that they know. He keeps his mouth shut, too. Now, the police are crunk, man. They got their man. It's high fives all around. Good job. You did that. Woohoo. We did that shit. So much later, but we ain't even gonna talk about that. They doing a whole bunch of congratulation and handshaking and pounding each other on the backs. They feeling pretty good right now. But that good feeling didn't last long, though, because the very next day, August 29th, 2007, another body was found. 41-year-old Karen Delgado Yates. She was known to sell a little ass from time to time. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Sex work is work. And y'all know coochie sell when cotton and corn don't. Come on now. Anyway, on August 29th, a real estate investor was coming to check on a vacant property at 1115 Hickory Street. He goes in and he sees that the place is trashed. Fucked up my rental property. He walks towards the kitchen and he sees a pair of legs on the ground. Let me tell you something. He didn't stick around to see nothing else. He hauls ass out the door, calling 911 to report about it. So he on the phone with 911. I think it's somebody dead enough. So they ask him, do you know? Is the person really dead? And dude, like, shit, I don't know. So they're like, will you go back in? And he like, shit, you want me to go back in there? And the 911 operator was like, please, can you please go back in there and check so we know who we need to send out? Are we sending an ambulance or are we sending the coroner? So the man goes back in. And then he gets the shit scared out of him. The woman is still alive. Barely. She has been worked the fuck over. Y'all, he beat her with the lid of a toilet tank. Beat her with that lid until the goddamn lid broke. Like, woo-wee. I done heard of a whole lot of shit that somebody can get beat with. This is a first for me, and apparently it was a first for poor Karen, too. One thing I do know, it did a hell of a lot of damage to Karen. She had a fractured skull, brain hemorrhaging, a broken nose, several cracked ribs, and more cuts and bruises than they could just count. But she was alive. Barely. And so they rush her to the hospital, but her injuries were just too much. She ends up joining the ancestors in the ambulance before she could even make it to the hospital. The police know that they got their man, but now they really got to prove it because Chilly been in their custody for 24 hours. So the first thing they got to do is determine when Karen's time of death was. Chilly ain't talking, so they need the evidence to start talking. Because that damn Chilly, oh, he was a hard nut to crack. It took them 3 separate sessions of interrogating him and a setup before he started singing his greatest hits. You see, after the second time that they went at him, they knew they had to trip him up some kind of way. So what they ended up doing was getting a picture of Linda's dog, Cheyenne, and they went back in there and they kept calling the dog Hitler. Don't you know this nigga corrected them? I don't know no dog named Hitler. I ain't been around no dog named Hitler. If you looking for the nigga that Hitler bit, it ain't me. Because guess what? That ain't Hitler. That's Cheyenne. Sir, how you know that dog name if you ain't never met that woman who owned this dog? And at that point, Chilly knew he was caught. Or maybe he wanted to get caught. Because at this point, he really starts to sing. Not sing. This motherfucker was singing like the rent was due. They say this nigga leaned back and started holding up his fingers and was like, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7. 6 people I could think of off the top of my head that I murdered. Yeah, I murdered them all. That's a sick motherfucker, y'all. He told them how he killed Professor Carol Cronenberg in 2004 and that he knew the dude that they convicted of her murder. What? Ooh, woo. And now that Chilly has confessed and told them details that only a killer could know, now they gotta do something. Cause remember, they convicted Claude McCullum for Carolyn's murder. Remember I told y'all I was gonna tie it all up with a cute little bow? Let me pull this motherfucker tight right quick. Claude McCullum, convicted for Carolyn's murder. Now you got egg on your face, police. That man told y'all that he didn't do it. And guess what? They actually had evidence to clear Claude, and they didn't do nothing about it. And here we have another black man that's been rotting in prison for a crime he didn't even commit. Because if you think about it, the police really put a battery in Chilly's back when he saw the police were actually trash when it came to actually investigating crimes, that someone else was locked up for a crime that he did. That just made that nigga go for broke. But imagine if the police had actually done the work. All of those women that died in 2007 would still be alive. It's unfucking acceptable. Police will find a dime bag of weed, but you can't find a murderer. Or if you do find a murderer, it ain't the actual murderer. Y'all just pick a nigga. Anyone will do, right? And then they make the narrative fit whatever it is they want it to fit. They don't care about the actual truth when a black or brown person is on the court docket. It's always guilty until proven innocent, and you got to be proven innocent by Jesus himself. Now, when it was all said and done, they charged Chilly with 2 counts of first-degree murder for Sandra and Karen, and 1 count of first-degree home invasion, 1 count of torture, 1 count assault with intent to do great bodily harm, 5 murders, 6 assault, 5 rapes, 1 attempted rape over a 2-week period in 2007, but he only gets 4 charges. You know, sometimes I hate our justice system. He did all those crimes. He should have been charged with each and every last one of them. And I know that the prosecutors go for the sure thing, but doesn't every victim deserve justice? Chilly went to trial May of 2008, and the prosecution came out swinging. They had DNA and cell phone records. The shoes from his house matched the bloody shoe prints they found at one of the scenes, and then there was a baseball cap with Chilly's DNA on it that was found at that house where Karen was beaten to death, and then the coup de grace was the cell phone records, because the cell phone records put Chilly near the scene of every last one of these crime locations when the women were attacked. Now, his defense, it wasn't me. And in a case of them hoes ain't loyal, their theory was that Chilly's brother, Melvin Hobbs, and one of his boys was actually responsible for the crimes. Ain't that a bitch? How the fuck I'ma pin the crime on my brother of all people? Like, damn, that wasn't a nigga you was acquainted with that you could have used? You know, maybe a distant cousin or something? Your brother? The nigga you grew up with? Ooh, that's cold, man. That's some cold work right there. And the defense did not call 1 witness. And Chilly didn't go nowhere near that stand. Nor did anybody else get up there to say a kind word for his ass. This nigga finally exercised his right to be silent. Baby, I want you to know it took the jury less than 2 hours to find him guilty on all charges. The jury was like, he did that shit. Now let's go home. June 18th, 2008, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Finally, I think he has used up his allotted quota of parole. Thank you very much. As of the recording of this podcast, Matthew Emmanuel Macon is serving his time at the St. Louis Correctional Facility near Alma, Michigan. And there was talk for a while of charging him with all of the crimes that he confessed to, but after his conviction, the prosecutor decided not to file any more charges. His reason being was that Matthew Macon would only make a mockery of the trials by torturing the victim's family because he was going to represent himself. And at the end of the day, he lives in a prison cell, and for the rest of his natural life, that's going to be his home. So no matter how many other charges that were levied against him, nothing would change or affect his current situation. And you know what? I can work with that. Justice is him being off the streets and never being able to hurt another woman again. He might not have faced up to all of his crimes, but he's in jail, he's in prison. He will never see the light of day outside of prison and barbed wire walls. We can roll with that. But what about that innocent man that sat in prison, rotting for a crime that he didn't commit for more than a year? Now, Claude McCullum did sue the department and he received a little $2 million settlement, but that ain't enough. That's not enough. Because guess what? If Chilly had not confessed, that man would still be in prison today. And what's so fucked up about this whole situation with this man is that the prosecution had video evidence that showed Claude McCullum was somewhere else when Carolyn was being murdered. And they buried that shit. They squashed it. They didn't share it with his attorney, and they sent that man to prison. Man, I'm telling y'all, the game is rigged. It's all well and good when you listening to some shit that happened to somebody else on a random podcast. So remember, y'all, shut the fuck up is free. Don't say shit. You just give them your name and tell them that you want a lawyer. That should be the only thing that you say to the police. Period. Full stop. I don't give a fuck what it is. Being helpful and open and forthcoming will get you locked up, tried, and convicted. Justice ain't blind or fair for an innocent motherfucker in the crosshairs of law enforcement. That bitch is biased, salty, lazy, and vindictive if you catch her on the wrong day. Off my soapbox now. And this New Nation has been the story of Matthew Emmanual Macon, AKA Chilly, a serial killer that was allowed to terrorize Lansing, Michigan. Of course, this happened 17 years ago, but that's not a long time. Policing is supposed to be so much better now, right? Is it? If it were, true crime podcasts wouldn't have much material to cover, right? And baby, I have so many stories to tell you, so much game to put you up on. Because I want you to put your guard up. Because shit is going down out here in our neighborhoods. And if I make even one person think twice, take some precautions. Make one person start seeing a situation for its potential to be fucked up, then my job here is done. Because these crimes didn't happen in a vacuum. They are still going on right now, today. Today, somewhere, there are serial killers among us. Men and women. Because don't get it twisted, honey. Women's just better at covering up our shit, though. You know. But we out here. And now, since you've made it this far, why don't you just go ahead and leave me a review right there on the streaming service that you listening to me on. Okay, you don't feel like typing? Then I tell you what, let's split the difference. Just hit that 5th star on that row and we'll just call it even. If you want to reach out and stay in touch on social media, I am Melanin Mayhem Podcast or Melanin Mayhem PC. When you put that Melanin Mayhem in there, you'll see that cute little logo. And if you know of a Melanin Mayhem maker that we should be talking about, drop me a line over at melaninmayhempodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, New Nation, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, if you stay ready, you ain't gotta get ready. It's one love, and your girl Renee is out this thing.